Hey everyone, Ben Bennett here, host of the Resolution Podcast. And what you're about to hear is a live teaching on loneliness that I did for the Resolution Movement Discord community. This Discord community is made up of resolutionists. It's a community of people overcoming hurts and struggles and helping others do the same. It's absolutely free to join, and you can find out more at resolutionmovement.org/join. Enjoy this episode. Tonight we're talking about overcoming loneliness, and hopefully this is encouraging to you. So many people these days are dealing with loneliness, so we'll get into what that is and how we can overcome it, how we can move towards greater connection with God and others. And we'll do a Q&A at the end. I'd love to hear from y'all in the chat. Just go ahead and put in the chat throughout this any questions that come up related to loneliness, and I'll try to get to all of those. But for me, I think the first time I experienced, well, looking back, that I experienced loneliness was perhaps when I was a teenager and my family had just moved to a new area of town and a new school district. And at the previous one, I had been bullied by people. I kind of didn't feel like I fit in. Like I felt like there was something wrong with me. There's things that I was picked on for. So I made this conscious decision when I moved to this new area that I was gonna act different. So what I did was I was really quiet. I shut down. I tried to fit in with the cool kids, but I was living and believing this lie that I had to hide to survive. And so I wasn't myself. I wasn't known. I didn't feel understood. I would just kind of show up and try and be like a chameleon and act like other people, hoping that I would be accepted. But I was deeply lonely. I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel known. I had friends or acquaintances, but they didn't really know me or know the things that I was struggling with. Fast forward to in 2021, the next time I experienced significant loneliness, this was in my adult life. This was several years ago. This was after years of going through therapy and recovery and healing. And I felt like I understood how to flourish in life, how to thrive in life. I was like, I'm not dealing with loneliness anymore. I've got true friends. I'm fully known. People know everything about me. And yet 2021 hit a year after the pandemic, and I felt so lonely again. And what had happened was 2020 hit, churches were shut down, my friends either stopped hanging out or they moved away or got married or started going to other churches. And so how I felt in that moment was like, wow, everybody has moved on. I stopped getting invites to hang out with people. People stopped initiating. People stopped asking me how I was doing. So throughout 2021, weekends would come and weekends would go. I felt so lonely. Nobody was reaching out to me. I didn't really know who to reach out to. People had moved on. And I'll get to what God did and how God kind of turned that around in my life later. But when it comes to this idea of loneliness, I want to talk about two things as we're trying to understand loneliness and what to do about it in our lives. And the first thing is this, that loneliness is not a lack of friends. It's a lack of meaningful connection. Loneliness is not a lack of friends. It's a lack of meaningful connection. You may have heard it said that we are more connected than ever before, yet we're lonelier than ever. How can that be? I mean, think about how many numbers you have in your cell phone. Maybe you have tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands. Think about the number of people we know or we have that we're friends with on social media, Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok. Think about the people at our work. Think about our family. Think about the people from high school or middle school growing up. We've been connected to a lot of people. And now with our phones, with the internet, there's so many people we're connected to. We're more connected than ever before in history. Think about 100 years ago, before the internet, before phones. People knew maybe a handful of people. But now we're more connected than ever, yet we're lonelier than ever. How is that true? Well, that's because loneliness is not a lack of friends. We may have a lot of friends, a lot of acquaintances. Loneliness is a lack of meaningful connection. I love Proverbs 18:24. It says, "A man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." It feels good to have a lot of acquaintances, to have a lot of friends, but it can be pretty detrimental to have a lot of friends. You know, a lot of people might know our name, but that doesn't prevent loneliness. We need meaningful connection. There's a study done by Springtide, and they found out, this was in 2022, they found out that 45% of young people feel moderately or extremely lonely. 40% of young people feel moderately or extremely lonely. That's huge. Young people, Gen Z, teenagers, young adults, so connected, going to high school, going to college, going to work. They're probably more connected to people in person than anyone in different age groups. Yet almost half of them say that they're moderately or extremely lonely. Loneliness is a huge issue. Certain countries have even put in place a prime minister of loneliness to try and figure out what to do about it because it's such an epidemic. I've read studies too on how loneliness is more deadly than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Loneliness contributes to diseases and stress and pain in life and mental health issues. It's a huge epidemic. We'll talk about what to do about it because it's a lot easier to cure than one might think. Second point is that God designed us to need meaningful connection and good relationships. And that's a huge cure to loneliness. Harvard has been doing this study for decades. I think it's been over 80 years now. And they're looking at what leads to the lowest amount of diseases in people's lives and what leads to the highest amount of happiness. And what they found was that it's good relationships. The head of the study said, good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. We need relationships. We need connection with other people. A lot of times Christians will talk about this idea that all we need is Jesus. And yes, for salvation, all we need is Jesus. But God designed us to need one another, to need people. Just look at, open the Bible from the beginning, Genesis 1 and 2. Right after God created Adam, he said, "It is not good for man to be alone." And he created Eve. Adam needed another human being, and so God created Eve. We need people. The New Testament uses the phrase one another 100 times exactly. It tells us to pray for one another, confess our sins to one another, to not stop meeting together with one another. It's astounding. It shows that we need one another. And so one thing to note is that the loneliness that you feel or somebody in your life feels is painful because God didn't create you to experience that. And the good news is that it can change. A couple minutes ago, I mentioned in 2021, for me, how I was dealing with such deep loneliness. Weekends coming, weekends going, not hanging out with anybody. I was living alone at the time, and I just felt so lonely. My friends had moved on, gotten married, they were going to different churches or stopped going to church completely. It's like my whole friend group here dissipated. And so what did I do? Well, I realized I need to do something about this. I need people in my life. I need to start connecting in a meaningful way. So I made it a point to at least a couple times a week to reach out to somebody, even if, they weren't a long-lasting friend. For example, I remember reaching out to people I had gotten connected to on Instagram that were also Christians. I found out they lived in the same area, so I invited them to coffee. There was this one guy, we met up for coffee, got to hear his story, shared my story with other people that were still in my life, still at the same church or whatnot. I started reaching out to them like once a month, trying to organize things, trying to get dinner, get coffee, inviting them over to my house. I also joined a new church. I joined a small group. I started meeting people and I took the initiative. A lot of people didn't invite me to come and hang out with them or to come over. But I said, either they're busy or they're lonely too. And so if I just kind of sit here and say, well, I'm lonely, nobody's doing anything about this, then things weren't going to change. I had to take ownership over my life and start initiating with other people. And 3 years later, a lot of that has changed. Another thing too that was huge for me was FaceTiming people who don't live in my city, because I've got friends all over the country. And so I made it a point to, throughout the week, texting people, calling people, FaceTiming people. And that started to really shift loneliness in my life. Because again, loneliness is not a lack of friends, it's a lack of meaningful connection. And so I needed to be meaningful or connected to people in a meaningful way. And so what does that mean, to connect with people in a meaningful way? Got a couple thoughts here. First, it means you have to even have proximity to people. So you can reach out to a friend, you can meet people at your church, at a gym, introduce yourself, invite people to coffee. You could join a chess club, you could go walk your dog, go to the dog park. You could go to the grocery store. If you're not seeing people each day, if you're working remote, if you don't have many friends, you don't feel connected, start getting in proximity with people, rubbing shoulders with people. And then from there, take ownership over your life. Take the initiative. Many times we are lonely because other people aren't reaching out to us, but then they're lonely because we're not reaching out to them. And it just continues the cycle. And so often we think the problem is us. We think that I'm the only one who's lonely. Something is wrong with me. People don't want to hang out with me. But that's the lie of shame that was introduced by the enemy in the garden to Adam and Eve back in Genesis. And so take the initiative, reach out to people. You don't have to continue believing that lie. The stats show that half of people are lonely, dealing with significant loneliness. You're not the only one. And so you can be the change, not only in your life, but in someone else's life by reaching out, by showing up for them, by initiating. And so first is the proximity. Second is to move towards that meaningful connection. It can be pretty simple. Begin by talking about how you're truly doing. Like, think about, what are you stressed about? What are you fearing? Or positively, what's going well? And this isn't just horizontally with other human beings. It's also vertically with God. Share with God. I mean, all you have to do is read the Psalms to see that when it came to his relationship with God, David was not lonely. He was intimately known by God, and he intimately knew God. Share about your problems, your fears, your hopes, your dreams with God, but also share that with other people. If there aren't many people in your life, just one or two other people. Have a conversation. And maybe you feel like, well, I'm so lonely right now. I'm not really connected to anyone. I don't have, excuse me, deep friendships. You can start to build that with someone. If you invite somebody to hang out that you meet, you can ask them about their story, where they grew up, what struggles they've experienced. And then you can ask them, how are you truly doing? What are you worried about? What's hard in life? What's going well? You can affirm them. You can repeat it back to them. Repeat what you're hearing in an empathetic way. And so when it comes to putting all this together, and having lasting change in our life, of overcoming loneliness. I think about the lasting change in my life that had to occur after 2021, that season of loneliness. I had to really start implementing routine and rhythms in my life. And so I'd encourage you to take one step, just one step today, to regularly implement something to combat loneliness in your life. It could be once a week. I've got it on my calendar. Once a week, I'm going to invite someone to coffee. I'm going to invite someone over. I'm going to ask someone if they want to go do this together. Or it's once a week, I'm going to plan a FaceTime call or a phone call with someone. I'm going to start going to the gym, a small group, once a week. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to ask them about their life. I'm going to initiate. I'm going to ask them if they want to meet up. You know, it doesn't have to be super huge, doesn't have to be a huge commitment. I mean, if I think about this, there's been times where I've met up with someone I didn't know, and they asked me how I was truly doing, and I just shared briefly, just a couple sentences. Oh, well, I'm actually not doing that well, and I'm struggling with this. And they said, oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. And they just offered a couple words. And in that moment, what it did for me was I didn't feel lonely anymore. I felt known. I felt understood. I felt like the thing that was weighing on me, someone else affirmed. And I didn't even have a real close relationship with them. And so it could be something as simple as that that can begin to cure loneliness in your life. But then what you want to move towards, what I've experienced, is being fully known. You know, the deepest, darkest things in your life, having a couple people that know everything about you, your deepest, darkest secrets, fears, the worst things you've thought, the worst things you've done. They know you and they love you and they remind you that because of Jesus, you're forgiven. You're a new creation, that God doesn't look at you any differently, that they don't look at you any differently. And those are things that I began moving towards in my life and rhythms that I have to this day. So right now we will get into some Q&A. Any questions so far? Not seeing any that have come up. You know, one of the questions that I often think of, or that people kind of find an answer to, that they don't know at first, they're looking for an answer to, is when people are struggling with some kind of unwanted behavior, whether it's pornography, whether it's anger, whether it's drinking too much, some kind of sin struggle in their life. A lot of times people are afraid to give that up. And it's hard to give that up. And a lot of times they think it's just because of their sin nature. But no, the reason that can be so hard to give up is because it's serving a purpose in their life. It's a way of coping with something, coping with trauma, hurt, stress, dissatisfaction in life. And it serves a purpose. And what I've seen happen in so many people's lives is when they start to give that up, they are then able to find something actually better to fulfill that purpose that the previous thing was serving. So for example, working with so many people who have been addicted to porn for years, at first their goal is just to stop looking at it, to try to stop. But then they realize they can't do it alone and they need other people. And so what happens is when they're tempted, they start reaching out to other people. And rather than, after a stressful day or they're dealing with hurt, rather than just going to pornography to try to feel some kind of escape or pseudo love or pseudo acceptance, they actually find the thing they're truly looking for by reaching out to somebody else. And that's God's way. You know, our unhealthy behaviors, these things are not random. We're trying to find something in them. But God's way that's going to truly satisfy us is when we reach out for help to somebody else. And then in that reaching out to help, we find what we're actually looking for. It's the love, it's the safety, it's the connection, it's being affirmed rather than avoiding our problems, taking our problems to other people, and they affirm us and they love us. And so I don't know how to turn that into a question, but that's something I've seen in people's lives. Okay, I got a couple questions here. See, the proximity thing is something that God is teaching me in my own life. That's awesome. I'm in a season where God has closed doors of connection with people. He's refining me, and I'm in situations often daily that require me to seek Him for wisdom. It's tough, but so worth it. What are some questions I can pray and ask God's guidance on when I'm back against the wall and don't see a way out? I relate to that. I went through something similar again back in 2021. I remember praying. I mean, this is what I'd encourage you with. I remember praying every day, literally every day for over a year, that God would provide, and I still pray it 3 years later, that God would provide spiritually and emotionally healthy friends in my life. Just continue to pray it. And He's delivered on that. Not in the way that I've necessarily wanted. It wasn't like I kept praying that and then all of a sudden 5 people in my city just I became all best friends with and whatnot. No, it was He started to answer that prayer, but it looked differently than I originally thought it would. He started to provide more connection with people I work with. He started to provide more connection with people around the country, and I just started reaching out to them more, and I started going and visiting them more in person. He started to provide a friend here in Dallas who started reaching out to me a lot more. And he has become a good, close friend, and he's spiritually and emotionally healthy. And at first I didn't see it because I was like, God, I want this. I want somebody who's in ministry, who's spiritually and emotionally healthy, who's like a tattooed person like me, just being so specific. But God provided the friend that I needed. And I continued to pray that. So I'd say continue to pray, continue to be honest before God. It's not really the frequency of our prayers that make our prayers significant. It's the fervency. It's how honest and how from the depths of our heart our prayers are. And that's what God wants to hear, and He will deliver. But also we need to act on it. Think about anything else in life, right? We don't just sit there and pray and ask that we'll get into a good college or graduate with perfect A's if you went to college. No, you apply to multiple colleges, you put your resume together, you study for whatever test you have to take in high school to try and get a good enough grade to be even considered for that college, and then you go throughout college and you have to work to pay for it. There's a lot of things in life that are God designed that we need, that we have to put the work in for. And so it comes back to pray, but also act and reach out and show up and develop new friendships. And I know it's hard and it gets tiring, and my family moved a lot growing up and I had to always make new friends, and it wasn't fun, but it's worth it. It is worth it. Okay. Another question. How do we choose people to hang out with? What if they are not safe? I like to look to the life of Jesus when it comes to this. He was called a friend of sinners. So He was friends with people that weren't safe. Safe, I guess it depends on how you determine the word safe. By safe, not cookie cutter and not, having their life all together and whatnot. we want to be wise with who we're friends with. We don't want abusive or manipulative or narcissistic people to be our friends, because as the Proverbs say, good or bad company corrupts good morals. And so if you're constantly around this bad company, it's going to get to you. You got to remember, you're not Jesus. You're a human being. And things, what's outside goes inside, or what we're surrounded by, what we listen to, how people behave can start to impact us. And so I think there is, like Jesus, a time to be acquaintances with people that are unhealthy, that are living a certain lifestyle. You can be acquaintances, you can be friends, but I don't know to what extent. And it depends on you and where you're at. If, for example, if you are really dealing with alcoholism and you want to be a good witness to your friends who are non-Christians who are alcoholic, it's probably not wise to go to the bar with them or to go over to their house if they're drinking. But other situations, whether it's going to the gym together or, you just gotta figure that out. What's the healthy limit for you based on where you're at? But looking for safe people is looking for people that are not going to condemn you, not going to judge you. Yes, they will share truth, but it's always with empathy. It's people who want to support you, but not to fix you. And unfortunately, it can be hard to find safe people. But generally, I found the most safe people in people who have been to recovery, who have gone to recovery ministries and churches like Celebrate Recovery, who have gone to Christian counselors, who have gone to workshops. It's people who have started to understand and be honest about their hurt in life, their struggles, the trauma that they've gone through, and how that has contributed to certain struggles. And generally, if people are able to start putting those pieces together in their life and are talking about it, I've found that a lot of those people can be healthy. But you gotta start getting to know people and learn, see how they behave. And a good rule of thumb is, are they like Jesus? Are they gracious? Are they forgiving? Are they kind? Do they model, or do they show the fruit of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, self-control. Not perfectly, but are you seeing that in their life? Hey friends, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to invite you to join the Resolution Movement Discord community, where you can access so many of our resources for free, connect with others, and join live talks like this one. You can find out more at resolutionmovement.org/join.